Genesis 13, verse 1. Abram inherits Canaan. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him. To the south, Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. And he went on his journey from the south as far as verse 4, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right, or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth, trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. Let's read commentary here for Genesis 13. Okay, so verses 1 through 7 commentary. Commentary is coming from the Tony Evans Bible Commentary. Having been sent away from Egypt, Abram and his family journeyed to the Negev. Then from the Negev to Bethel, gradually making their way back toward the land of promise. By this point, Abram had become rich in livestock, silver and gold, but so had his nephew Lot. Had the men's wealth just been silver and gold, they would have had no problem, but their herds were too vast for any one area. There simply wasn't enough water and pasture for all their livestock. Abram recognized that he and Lot had to separate. Surprisingly, though, Abram chose to preserve relationship over keeping the economic upper hand. He allowed Lot to pick his plot of land first. This was an incredibly generous decision. In that culture, as head of the household, Abram had every right to make the first choice himself, but he had faith in God's promise and provision, so he was able to defer to Lot. Verse 10 through 13. Lot looked at the two options and saw that the entire plain of the Jordan, as far as Zoar, was well watered everywhere. He saw the material wealth in front of him, but failed to see what he should have, that it couldn't last. God was going to judge the region soon, because the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. Yet Lot chose to get close to sin for the material gain and beauty of a moment, journeying eastward towards Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis, moving east was always a bad sign, and that is precisely the direction in which Lot had headed. Earlier, Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that what can be seen with the physical senses. Here, however, God lifted up Abram's eyes to see the spiritual promise of God. The great lesson for Israel and for us here is that we must get God's perspective on our situations, not relying on our own. We perceive only the temporary. God sees the eternal. What God offered to Abram was long term. I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. Moreover, God seemed to increase his promise, now telling Abram that his descendants would multiply so dramatically that they would be as innumerable as the dust of the earth. Best of all, Abram wouldn't have to do anything to make this happen. I will give it to you, God plainly told him. The beautiful part of obeying God is that you don't have to take what's yours. He gives it to you freely. Abram moved his tent near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, building there another altar to the Lord. He heard God's promise and received it, worshiping God because of his word and finding security in that word, unlike he'd done during his time in Egypt. Abram was now moving by faith, not by sight, which would be the foundation not only of his obedience, but also of the obedience that God wants for all who follow him. See 2 Corinthians 5:7. Okay, that concludes Genesis 13. Stay tuned. We're going to continue on with Genesis 14.